We'll start in a few minutes, and today will be mostly a back lying lesson. So you just want to have a comfortable space to lie on your back. If you like to have a little something underneath your head when you're on your back, an inch would be probably the most that anybody would need. But if it feels a little bit better for you to have just a small lift under your head, you can find something like a towel to fold up, something that's firm to put underneath your head. Otherwise, we shouldn't need too many props today. All right, so welcome everyone to the first class of the fall Feldenkrais series. I don't know where you are, but it doesn't really feel like fall here yet today, but some colors are changing, some leaves are changing colors, so it's happening. I took a couple weeks off. I know a lot of you were with me over the summer, but some of you also took a break over the summer. So it's nice to see some of you again. And we're going to explore, the series is called Being Good to Yourself. We're exploring lessons that in some way I'm thinking of them as an antidote to the time that we spend with technology. It's really common to feel fatigue in the eyes, the shoulders, the neck, the upper back, due to the ways that we relate to our environment when technology is present. And so then here we are, interacting with technology, but luckily you will be able to lie on your back and mostly interact with yourself and the rest of the environment during the lessons. And then that's actually just a good reminder that you don't need to see me during the lesson. Most important is that you can hear me. I won't ever be demonstrating. So, your device can be kind of farther away from you as long as you can hear. You don't need to worry too much about that. And of course, if I can see you, if you can point the camera towards you, that's always helpful. But back to these habits that occur when we are working with technology. There's something that can really seep into other parts of our lives. And so in this practice, we do something that's really primal. We use our own sense of weight, and we learn how to find support from the surfaces we are on. So our playground is the floor and gravity. And we learn to know that we are in connection with the surface of the ground in a way that we can trust. And this connection to the realities of the ground and gravity can bring about a really internal sense of security within us. It's something that a connection with a device often does not do. Like, when have you had some connection with a device or been in relation to a device and just had this sense of calm within you? Maybe, but it's different from how we relate to the floor. So when we feel this really deep organic sense of safety, that we can trust our relationship to the surfaces that we're on, the environment that we're in, it really calms the nervous system. And then likewise, when we cannot trust, or when it's not clear that we have a connection to the surface, or it's not clear how we support ourselves, then there can be this internal sense of insecurity about our position in space, and it can erode our sense of self-confidence. It can lead to tension, to discomfort. So those situations where we might not feel at ease can lead to this strain in the upper back, the shoulders, holding the breath, maybe tension in the eyes and the face. So again, we're going to be exploring that in this series. So it's really important for us to first, though, find this profound sense of support from the floor to be able to find self-reliance, in the sense that we can say, oh, this is my relationship with the world. Here's my relationship with my senses. Here's my relationship with the surfaces you are on. So the question or an inquiry is, how do we find ourselves connected in such a way that internally we have this profound sense that we're awake, that we're alive, and we have an internal sense of support that carries us through life? So the lessons will hopefully provide us some way to find more connection with ourselves. So that's what we're going to explore. And one way we do this is to practice listening to ourselves with compassion, learning to know our boundaries, learning to know the places that we can move into more during a lesson and really explore more, and then places where maybe we need to rest more. And, you know, as I see the room, nobody here is new to this method, so I won't go too much into kind of those guidelines. But on Sunday at 3:30 before the 4 o'clock class, I am going to just do a little talk about the method. It's geared a little bit more towards people who, you know, maybe haven't had as much experience in the method, but you're, of course, welcome to come. So with that, let's start in standing. And so in standing, take a moment and tune yourself to the relationship with the space you're in. It might be a room that you practice in a lot, might be a new space. So tuning into that relationship, it means to, you know, look around, to notice what is it like for you to look down, to look up, to look to the right and the left. And as you do that, starting to notice the way that you embody yourself, the way you sense your relationship with the environment and the relationship with yourself. And then notice the connection that you have with your feet on the floor. And maybe the question is more, do you have a sense that the floor is really there? And then just take a small step forward, and just a single step, and notice when you step, whether you land in such a way that there's this very clear assurance or confidence, or whether you land in such a way that there's a little hesitation within you. Yeah, and you could, again, take another step or take a few steps, and you notice, is there a moment or a leg where you notice that you're not quite as well connected as you might want to be? Great. And then just stand with your feet underneath you. We're just gathering a little information here. And reach one of your arms towards the ceiling. And as you reach to the ceiling, you can lift yourself so that you look up to where you're reaching. And you can do it a few times. Whatever arm you chose, just stay with that arm. And sense this process of reaching the arm towards the ceiling, lifting yourself to look up towards it, and feel this idea of coming away from the floor, up and through yourself as you lengthen the arm towards the ceiling. So can you feel that you lift away from the floor, up through yourself as you reach? Great. And then you can let that go and try reaching with your other side and looking up to where you're reaching. And now that you're on the second side, you can start to notice or compare. Is one side more elastic? Which side do you experience being more available? Which side do you feel safer, more stable on? Most people will find that when they turn their head to look up towards the hand that's reaching, that one side will be pretty different than the other side. One side might not feel as safe or as clear for you. So notice that. If you want to go back to the first side, you can. Which side do you find stability or a sense of safety from? And which side might you feel a little bit more hesitant on? Yeah. And safety or stability doesn't necessarily mean reaching further. Great. Okay. So please leave this. Remember that feeling. Remember whatever kind of information you gathered about yourself and come to lie on the floor. Lie on your back. And you can lay with your legs long if that's comfortable. So first, notice the way you interact with the floor as you rest. And can you bring your attention to your upper back? What is it like today? What's your relationship with it? The area of the back of your shoulders, the way that your right shoulder blade rests, and the way that your right arm, your right elbow meets the floor. And your right hand, how is your right hand resting? What direction is your right palm facing? And then bring attention to your left shoulder blade. Is it clear? Are you not sure where or how to sense the left shoulder blade? And then scan down to your elbow and to your left hand, the palm and the fingers. Now, if you were to imagine pointing at something, like perhaps you were with someone and you were outside and you saw a bird in the sky and you wanted to point to them and point to show them and, trying to be accurate, which hand or arm do you imagine yourself pointing with? Which arm, which hand would be more precise, more direct? And you can kind of note, is it your dominant hand? Is it your non-dominant hand? And then just bring your attention back to the surface of your back, all the way down to the base of your spine, your sacrum, that more flat area at the base of the spine. The two halves of the pelvis are on either side of that, and sensing the way the two sides of the pelvis meet the floor. And just notice if you have relaxed into the floor in such a way that you sort of have an expectation that the floor will maintain you, the floor will hold you. Have you fallen into the floor? Or are you more alert and resting with the floor so that in such a way the floor can start to become a source for you? Okay, so with this next exploration, you can keep your legs long, or if that starts to feel uncomfortable, you can always bend your knees and stand your feet. And so start to tune into which arm feels more available to you. Which arm do you more readily move your attention to? And whichever arm that is that seems more available to you, could you, if it's really far away from your torso, could you just bring it a little closer in towards your side? It doesn't have to be snug in towards you. And then once you do that, bend your elbow so that your forearm is vertical. So your upper arm bone stays on the floor, the forearm is vertical. And could you do it so that right now your wrist is somewhat long? If your fingers were really kind of stiff and straight, they'd be pointed towards the ceiling, but you don't need to have your fingers like that. So your fingers can be somewhat relaxed. So yeah, just one arm. Great. And now begin to rotate your forearm a little bit so that your palm turns a little bit towards your foot, down towards the foot side of your mat, and then rotate it so that your palm turns more towards the head side of your mat. And so just gently rotating the forearm, which rotates the hand. That's right. And as you continue to do this, can you pay attention to your thumb, the sort of outward and inward turning, as if it's coming from your thumb or following where the thumb moves in space? Great. And continuing to do that, but now tracking your pinky finger. This turning of the forearm, turning of the hand. Sort of inward and outward turning of your pinky finger. And if you thought about the movement starting at your pinky finger, you begin the rotation from the pinky finger. Good. And then shift your attention to your middle finger as if the rotation comes from the middle finger. And you can sense the freedom of the movement of the turning. Sensing for yourself what range of motion is easiest, what direction is easiest. You know, whether it's easier for you to turn your palm towards your feet or towards your head. And continue this movement a few more times. Again, it's not a question of how far you can turn, but how can you make the movement smooth? Can you make it even smoother? Now, which means you sense something within yourself, some quality of moving your forearm and your hand through space, this way of rotating the forearm around your elbow. And as you make this movement, what do you sense in your upper arm? Do you notice any movement in your upper arm? Is your upper arm responding to the inward and outward turning? What do you notice in the way your shoulder blade moves relative to the floor? And does your scapula, your shoulder blade, does it move downward? Does it slide upward? Do you have a sense of your ribs at all on this side? Do you have a sense of the way your sacrum meets the floor in response to this rotating of the arm? So just noticing any subtlety within which this movement is reflected through yourself. Could your feet sense the movement of your arm? Great. If you wanted to promote this movement with what you're doing with your sacrum, what would you have to do to help support this movement in some subtle way that you move your sacrum or that you move your pelvis? Would that be possible that the pelvis could invite some kind of movement like this through your forearm so that the hand becomes the outcome of other connections you start to make within yourself? And notice for yourself whether or not your eyes are involved in this movement, the way your eyes move in your head. And so all of these inquiries are not necessarily something you might feel or be able to feel, but it's this idea of how moving the forearm here actually involves moving the whole self. Okay, so pause for a moment, bring that arm down, and just pay attention for a moment to what's changed. What do you notice is different? And when you start to bring this kind of alert attention to yourself, a stream of attention, what begins to transpire within yourself? So you can notice for yourself how your arm rests on the floor, how your shoulder rests, the sense of space within your torso. What about the way your breath comes into this side of your torso? Okay, now bend your other elbow and take a few moments to start to explore this rotation, this turning of your forearm, the movement that has your palm turned to face more towards your head and then more towards your feet. And I think most people will find that it's a very different experience on one side to the other. So first you just notice the way you experience this arm, this rotation within yourself. It may be that the first side that you chose, there was a more direct experience. Like maybe that was the arm that you imagined you would point with, perhaps. And maybe, and this is sort of, I'm speaking from my own experience, that the second arm feels a little bit more abstract. And maybe if I'm generous, I would call it like more of the artistic arm, where the other arm is that very direct, precise arm. So, you for yourself, finding what the internal quality is of this side. And again, it's not a question of how far you're going, but making the movement so that it becomes smoother and smoother. And as you do it, you can listen, trace this movement, the reflection of this movement through yourself. The way that your scapula, your shoulder participates. The way you may feel your chest or your ribs in some very subtle way responding. A way that your spine may rotate or twist. A subtle way in which your sacrum participates. The way that your head would roll. When would your head turn a little bit towards your hand? And when would you roll or turn your face away from your hand? So play with that for a moment. What's the relationship for you? What would feel easy between this rolling or turning of your hand and how you might turn your head? The relationship you have with the connection of your eyes and this movement of your arm. Great. So whatever you're finding with your head, could you just for a moment see what it's like to turn your head the other way relative to your hand turning? So it may take a moment for you to stop or inhibit whatever's familiar and bring about a little change. Great. Okay, pause, leave that, let your arm come down. And again, just tune yourself to the experience of whatever's left over from this experiment of rotating the hand. Now, how does the attention to yourself affect your personal experience, your sense of internal space, or even a shifting towards maybe a calmness that starts to come when you shift your attention away from other activities or activities of your mind by starting to pay attention to your senses? What do you start to experience? Okay, now please bend both elbows so you bring both forearms vertical. And remember, you can always change up if you want to lengthen your legs or stand your feet. And start to turn both forearms in this way, both hands in this way. And you can notice in these very first moments when you start to turn them, whether you turn them in such a way that they both turn upwards towards your face and both turn downward towards your feet in a kind of unison. Or maybe you have the impulse to turn one up and one down. Great. So start to notice the timing. Which hand is actually leading the movement? And so if let's all turn the hands or the arms so that both hands turn towards the face and then both hands turn towards the feet. And notice which hand is actually leading the movement and then which one is following. Which hand seems to know itself in space more clearly and which one is a little bit more vague. Yeah. And gradually see if you can make it so that you bring both hands into being awake and alive in this way that they more or less turn simultaneously. And maybe one hand can turn farther than the other hand. So maybe you don't turn them as far so that they can be in this more harmonious unison. Because you might notice that one hand can turn upward more easily or one hand can turn downward more easily. Great. And then if you imagine that you have laser beams or a flashlight, a beam of light shooting straight out of the center of your palms. And as you make this movement, there's a moment, a very split second, where those two beams of light that are coming out of your palms turn towards each other and would point at each other. And so you can continue to turn, but notice that exact moment that your palms turn and you sense that your hands are really clearly connected to each other, where the beams point exactly at each other. That's right. So you turn them upward and you turn them downward and you bring them to this moment in which you sense they're pointed exactly towards each other. And find that place where they're pointed right towards each other, where those beams of light point right towards each other, and pause there. This really interesting connection you have of your hands, some kind of internal alignment in some way where your right and your left sides meet each other. And from there, can you turn one towards your face and one hand down towards your feet? And then again, they'll still come through the center and come to this moment of meeting where the beams of light point right at each other. And so continue that simultaneously, turning one hand up and one hand down. And sense, when is it that they meet? Notice that moment for yourself, this kind of moment of harmony. Great. Okay, let that rest. Let the arms come down. And notice again how it is to be connected with the floor, but also with both hands, with both arms in this way. Do you have some different sense of your center? Is your attention not focused on the right and not so much focused on the left, but your attention might be focused a little bit more on a sense of connection or something more equal on both sides, or both sides are awake. They might still be different, but maybe they're connected. Okay, bend your elbows again. So we're kind of building this connection. And very slowly start to bring your hands towards each other as if to interlace your fingers together in front of you. So you start to find this connection, you begin to interlace your fingers. And then you can slowly separate the hands again. And do this a few times, really taking a moment as if you're studying this process by which you bring your hands together to interlace the fingers. And you can notice which hand leads the way. Which hand is following and waiting? Which hand is receptive? And then which hand is very directive? So you can start to feel or have a sense for yourself as you interlace your fingers, which hand seems to be able to find the space? And then which hand creates the space for you to interlace? Yeah, and are they both equally accurate, or is one a little different than the other? Yeah, it's a really deeply embedded pattern of movement. Most of us do it in such a familiar way that we don't think about it. It's a very established habit of which thumb is on top. And so you're still staying with this first way of interlacing, but try a couple of times now to just simply quickly bring them together. And watch how familiar the bringing together feels. Really quickly bring them together and apart. Great. And then bring them apart and pause. And so think this time when you go to interlace your fingers, you're going to change the interlacing. So you'll change which thumb is on top, or the little finger that was on the inside will become the little finger that's on the outside. So you change the information by one finger. Slowly. And listen to yourself as you start to bring this alternative or non-habitual interlacing together. Notice the accuracy. Yeah, and again, which hand is dominant? Which hand is the one that listens and waits? Which hand creates the opening? Which hand is the expression and which hand is the director? Great. And now alternate. So one time you interlace the hands in the habitual way, and then the next time you interlace the hands in the non-habitual way. But as you do it, can you let the hand that's been the receptive hand or the listening hand, can you change its role so that now it's the director? So you shift. The hand that was directing things before becomes the receptive hand. And find out what happens when you receive with the hand of yourself that's been more directive. How do you listen to this communication within yourself? What kind of change does it make for you? Okay, now interlace your fingers in the familiar way and begin to take your hands upward towards the ceiling. And as you do that, start to rotate them so that your palms start to turn upward towards the ceiling. So your fingers stay interlaced, but as your arms lengthen, your elbows lengthen towards the ceiling, you turn your arms, your forearms, your hands in such a way that your palms turn towards the ceiling. And then bending the elbows and bringing the interlaced fingers, the palms back towards yourself. So a few times like that, the fingers stay interlaced as you take the arms towards the ceiling, the palms turn towards the ceiling. And then as you bring your palms back towards you, they face your chest, your abdomen. And so start to really listen to the rotation that occurs, not just in your forearms, but in your upper arms, in your shoulders. So watching this movement of your arms in space, what happens with your shoulders? What happens with the way your ribs participate? Is there some way in which you sense if your spine gets longer as you do this movement? When would you send your spine to get longer? What happens with the way your legs, your pelvis engage with this movement of the arms, the rolling of your hands, the turning of your palms? Great. And continue to make this movement, but next time you make the movement, take your arms so that they move a little bit further in the direction of overhead. So not straight up towards the ceiling, but each time gradually start to take the arms a little bit further overhead. And every time you come back to your chest, your abdomen, and your palms turn back towards you. That's right. And again, gradually listen to your shoulder blades as you do this. Listen to what direction your shoulder blades move or glide on the floor so that your hands can start to go overhead. Watch whether your shoulder blades want to slide upward or do they want to glide back and down towards each other. Great. Okay, leave this for a moment, rest. And bend your elbows again. Bring your hands towards each other and interlace your fingers in the non-habitual way. And begin again to rotate your hands upward towards the ceiling and gradually overhead. That's right. You're welcome to bend your knees and stand your feet. And as you start to lengthen your arms overhead, your palms turn away from you. Play a little bit with the directions. Could you go overhead and a little bit to the right? That's right. And then you come back and see if you can go overhead a little bit to the left, and sensing if one direction feels a little bit easier. Notice how your eyes connect with the movement. Okay, leave that for a moment. And now place your hands over your head. Bring your hands over towards the top of your head so that your palms are near the top of your head and your palms are facing the top of your head. And from there, interlace your fingers so your hands are above your head like this. Your palms are turned towards your head. And simply slide your hands away from you so that you lengthen your elbows, and then bring the palms back towards you. So your palms stay facing the top of your head. You're elongating the arms, and the palms move away from the top of the head. The elbows and the wrists fold and bend and open when they need to. And you might notice if there's a point when you do this that you would want to begin to rotate your hands as you go, but for just a moment here, keep your palms directed to your head. And if you want, if you'd like, you could go a little right, a little left. Great. And then change the movement so that as you slide your hands away from yourself, as your elbows start to lengthen, you rotate your palms so that by the time you lengthen your arms, your palms are turned away from the direction of your head. And as you bend your elbows, you turn your palms back towards the head. And again, you can continue to play with moving a little bit this way and that way, and sensing for yourself which side of your ribs are more happy with this, which side of your back, which shoulder seems to like the movement more. Great. Okay, let that go. Bring your arms down. Take your legs long. Good. Now, bend your left knee, stand your left foot, and interlace the fingers with the hands at the top of the head like they just were, the palms facing the top of the head. And make this movement of taking your hands away from your head, turning your palms away from your head, and lengthening your arms a little to the right. And then bend your elbows and bring your palms back towards the top of the head. And watch for yourself as you lengthen the arms a little bit to the right, turning the palms away from your head. Watch for yourself how you engage your left foot with the floor. Can you lengthen your arms overhead and to the right in such a way that you come away from your left foot? You open, you lengthen through your skeleton, your spine lengthens to help this process of pressing the hands upward and away from you. And you can start to notice whether this invites a little twist or a little turn as you explore the movement for a while. So noticing if you have the sense that you come away from your left foot as you lengthen your arms. And you might find that you have a tendency to push the left foot into the floor. And so let's actually all do that consciously for a moment. Push the left foot into the floor, and the left pelvis can lift as you lengthen your arms upward and to the right. And when we push the foot into the floor, we generally have this sense that there's an increase of pressure. That's what pushing does. And so if you pay attention to this, you know that something's going downward towards the floor through your foot, and then something's going upward through your spine and your arms. And so discover this action of something moving downwards and something moving upwards. Great. And then for a moment, you can discover for yourself if it's possible for you to leave your foot connected to the floor without pushing firmly into the floor with the left foot. Can you not increase the pressure of your left foot, but your skeletal structure is so connected to the floor, that foot is so connected to the floor that it invites you to lengthen away from it, that you move away from your left foot. You have a sense that you draw yourself away from your foot as you make this movement of lengthening the arms, turning the palms, lengthening the arms a little to the right, away from that left foot. That's it. And so you can feel how you can time this movement of actually coming away from your left foot, and your left pelvis can still lift, and turning, lengthening up through yourself into the right. How you curve yourself, how you arch yourself or spiral to the right. And as you begin to turn your palms, lengthen your arms, can you follow your hands with your head and your eyes? Great. Okay, let that rest. Bring your arms down, take your legs long. And for a moment, sense your breath. Let your head roll a little bit one side and the other. Great. Bend your right knee, stand your right foot, and bring your arms overhead so you interlace your fingers and turn your palms so they face the top of the head. And please rest in between my speaking if you need to do a few movements and then come back to it, rest. So now, did you interlace your fingers in the habitual way? If you did, can you switch them so that they're in the non-habitual way? And start to make this movement of coming from your foot, your right foot, up through yourself, lengthening the spine, lengthening the arms overhead and a little bit to the left as you turn the palms away from the head. That's right. And you can start by really engaging with the floor with the right foot. What is it like to push the floor with the right foot? So you have this very clear connection that something's going down, your right foot's going down, and there's a lengthening through your spine and up through the arms. And you can start to look towards your hands as you lengthen your arms. Yeah, good. And that using of the floor, that pushing of the foot into the floor might just help you get the sense of direction, how you can find that direction of length up through yourself. It may allow you to turn, to arch, to spiral a little bit as you lengthen the elbows and turn the palms away, finding a little twist within yourselves. Great. And continue that, whatever you're playing with, but feel now, do you need to push into the floor with the right foot? Can you keep that right foot very connected? It's so connected to the floor that you feel you can just pull yourself away from it. And so you lengthen, you find the length through your spine, out through the arms. That's it. Great. Okay, let that rest. Bring your arms down, bring your legs down. And again, sense your experience of resting with the floor. Notice if there's a different kind of tone within yourself. Or maybe you listen to the floor a little differently, or you listen to yourself differently. Okay, bend both knees now, stand both feet. And interlace your fingers above your head so that your palms are turned towards your head. And begin to lengthen your arms overhead and turn your palms away from you. And notice for yourself the sensation of what it is now to come away from both feet as you lengthen your hands overhead. And so, the simple movement is, okay, lengthen the arms, turn the palms away from the head, then bend the elbows, bring the palms back towards the top of the head. But doing this from your whole self. So can you feel that you initiate the movement from coming away from the floor, away from your where your feet are connected to the floor? And you can sense for yourself, which leg is more dominant, which foot is more clear. So to sense that, press with your feet down in such a way that then you feel that length up, a timing of support for you to lengthen your arms. Yeah, and thinking of going just overhead now. So like both feet are pressing, you're thinking of going straight up through the spine rather than like Kathy, you're turning right now, which is beautiful exploration. But yeah, think of going right up through the top of your head. So again, push with both feet into the floor in order to feel a press upward all the way through your hands. So you lengthen yourself away from your feet, driving upward through your spine, turning your palms as you lengthen the arms. And as you're doing it with both feet, you're trying to sense, is one foot more clear? Maybe it's very clear that one foot is more clear, maybe not. Choose a foot and press more with that foot. Make it so that one foot presses. That's it. Good. And then try the other foot so that gradually you can get a sense if one leg is more clear. And gradually you can start to create a more uniform, equal force through both feet, through both legs, evenly balanced through both legs. That's it. And notice the moment where you feel length in your spine. Do you feel length in your spine when your arms lengthen or when your hands come back towards your head? Okay, let that go for a moment. Bring your arms down, take your legs long. And if you recall the first movement, the simple movement of turning your arm, and maybe choose one arm and just bend that elbow and come back to that first movement we did of rotating the arm so that the palm face towards your head and towards your feet. Feeling almost an absence of effort as you do this. The ease in which you can breathe. And notice how you might want to roll your head as you do this. How your eyes engage with the arm. And listen to the quality that you have of listening to yourself. Do you sense this rotation in more than just your arm? Do you sense it now more through your ribs or your spine or even into your pelvis? Great. And then bring that arm down, bend both knees and stand your feet. And with that kind of quality of listening to yourself, take your hands over the top of the head, interlace your fingers, and feel both feet engage with the floor so that you can lengthen away from the feet, lengthen the arms, and turn the palms away from you. So what we were just doing, but with this different way of listening. And then you bend your elbows and bring your palms back towards your head. So you can feel how both feet engage with the floor, press a little bit into the floor to direct length through the spine, out through the palms. That's right. And you start to feel for the timing of it. Listen for the timing of it. Ease in the jaw. Great. And then could you start to make the movement with a little bit of quickness? So feet engaging with the floor to lengthen up through the arms quickly, like a little pop, 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 pop. Yeah. And maybe the arms don't get to fully lengthen. You sort of find this almost bounce through from your feet, through your spine. A quick little pressing of the arms away, but you have the sense that the movement, the whole movement rolls up through you from the connection of your feet to the floor, and it quickly pops right up through you, directly up. That's it. And then one time you can do it with your right foot, reaching the arms a little bit over to the left. And one time pressing with your left foot, reaching your arms more over to the right. That's it, kind of back and forth. Great. The head might turn. You can turn your eyes to look and see your hands. Great. And then find the central axis, find your center, and make the movement again right through the center quickly. A little bop, 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 bop. Nice. Great. Rest for a moment. Bring your arms down. Just take your legs long. Notice your breath. Okay, so one more time, bend your knees and stand your feet. Interlace your fingers. You can choose the interlace and extend your arms and turn your palms away from you and keep them lengthened like that. So the arms are overhead. Yeah, they might be a little bit towards the ceiling, of course, working with comfort. So you keep your arms extended. And now just work with your feet, pushing, finding that pop, pop, pop up and through your spine. So you keep the arms lengthened and come away from your feet up through your palms. A little bit quicker if it feels okay. Yeah, that little bounce. And noticing how your head might rock a little bit. So you're reaching away from your feet. Great, excellent. Let that go. Take your arms and your legs down. Just let your arms rest by your side. Sense the connection you have with your hands and the connection with your feet. Any sense of wholeness that you experience. How awake are you to the sense of your whole self? Great. And then simply roll to your side and take your time to come up to stand so that you can explore for a moment what effect this has had on your relationship to yourself and standing relative to the ground. So as you come up to stand, notice how it is now that you relate to the space you're in. Has your sense of dimension changed? Is the room large enough to contain you? And then see what it's like to step forward and stand on one foot. And if there's something different about the way you trust the floor to be there to support you, is there something that's more secure in yourself? And you can step forward with your other foot or take several steps one after the other and sensing each foot as you land that there's ground and there's relationship to it. And if you feel some kind of security, you can notice what does that do to your sense of well-being? What does it do to the sense of your breath as your breathing comes and goes? Great. And then just come to stand and try reaching to the ceiling. See what it's like to reach up with one arm and to look up at that hand. Yeah. And then you can come down and try the other side. And perhaps you remember which side you could look up that was more stable and which side was not as clear or stable. And just notice for yourself whether this quality of reaching up and through yourself has changed a little bit, has transformed a little bit. Do you feel organized in a different way or energized in a different way? Great. Okay, so I'm going to leave the lesson there for us tonight. I always leave the meeting up for a little conversation afterwards. So you're welcome to exit the meeting, stay with your sensation. You're also welcome to stay, ask questions, and you can also stay and just listen. I do always record the Q&A session afterwards. It's just an audio file that I put on the recording. So if you want to kind of take your time to be with your sensations and come back to it, you can always do that also. So thanks, everyone.